Now we're all the way back to my number 7, which is the Milwaukee Bucks, Logan. Interesting that after all your Bucks slander, I actually have them lower than you in my contender rankings. They're still number 2 for me out east. I just think it has become increasingly clear that the West is way better. The bottom end of the East is really weak, but also, like, outside of Boston, dude, I just don't see, like, that real high-end contender. I think Boston is going to waltz through the East this year. Since hiring Doc Rivers, Logan, the moment of doom, the Bucks are 15-16. They're 15th in offensive rating. They're 14th in defensive rating. This is just a thoroughly uninspiring basketball team right now. Watching the Knicks game yesterday, and by the way, shout out to the Knicks. I should have mentioned them as an honorable mention. Even without Julius Randle, they're still very much in that sucks to play in the first round category because they're going to grind you up defensively. Brunson is averaging 34 points per game over his last 13. The load he is carrying is ridiculous, and I don't want him to have to sustain that. I don't love that. It speaks to their lack of a second creator, but my God, I trust that dude in the playoffs. So I would not want to face the Knicks, but in that matchup, Brunson is just toasting Brook Lopez out of high pick and roll. And we've seen the issues that him sitting and drop consistently in these playoff environments can present, but he's also not agile enough for him to guard in space. And so that's a problem. He can be a really effective regular season defender, not as ideally built for the playoffs. Also, Hartenstein was just floating them to death out of those drop looks. Also, of course, no guard could stay in front of Brunson, who isn't the shiftiest, quickest guard. A lot of his work is going to be done with sheer craftiness, but still he was able to drive quite successfully against the Bucks because of their weaknesses at the point of attack. It also just felt like New York cared way more, and they were just making more high-effort plays. They were on every loose ball. Like, they were just making exceptional plays defensively with their hands, stripping the Bucks, and Milwaukee just never really got them back in that way. And when I look at the pieces outside of Giannis is doing his thing. Now, specifically in that game, I thought the Knicks did a good job on him, and specifically OG in the second half, but he had his stretch where he was getting whatever he wants. Offensively this year, he's been incredible. Dame, we know, has been far more inconsistent than we would have expected, and still scares me if I'm an opposing team in a playoff environment, but not at the level of Dame last year, who was giving you a 32 a night on whatever it was, 65% true shooting, like one of the craziest scoring seasons ever. You're not getting that Damian Lillard. You're getting a Damian Lillard who has struggled more in terms of getting to the rim and who has struggled more in terms of his pull-up shot making. Brook Lopez is the least effective as an interior scorer that he's been. I have seen enough Dame Brook pick and pop actions to last me a lifetime, man. It's stagnant, it's repetitive, and there's just a lack of that rim running element that could really unlock what Dame could do as a half-court creator a little bit more. As an interior defender and a rebounder also, I think Brook has taken a step back from recent seasons. Chris Middleton, I just cannot bet on being healthy. I cannot bet on carrying the load as a third option offensively that they need him to, nor can I count on him athletically and as a rebounder being what they need from a forward. So there's just a lot of red flags with this team. Slow, old, not defending well, mediocre rebounding team, even though they're supposed to have these size advantages. And yet, in spite of all that, I still bet that they make the Eastern Conference Finals just because I think the East is weak. It's just they just have a lack of intimidating teams. And when Giannis and Dame play together, this team still is 43-21. They're still a top 5 offense this year for a reason. That's still clearly a top 3 duo in basketball, and they can overwhelm most people, especially if they do really tap into the Dame Giannis pick and roll. Praise be the day that happens. I'm not fully betting on it, but like that would be pretty unguardable, especially because they still have good spot up shooting alongside them. They're still top 5 in threes made on a 37% clip. But all of their issues this year have gone unresolved and remarkably have arguably just gotten worse and worse, and they've been playing their worst basketball as of late. They've lost 4 straight now, a couple of them just to bad basketball teams. So I'm out on the Bucks, man. I'm out on the Bucks, and yet I still think they make the Eastern Conference Finals. But this is an incredibly disappointing team. They're not like the 2013 Lakers when you look at, oh my God, splashy offseason, and then you limp into the playoffs. But I was just wrong about this team. I thought this team could win the title. And not just that, I thought that they were like the front runner or the co-front runner at the very least. And they just have glaring issues. And unfortunately, Dame was not a human flex seal for this team. So I have them all the way down at number 7.
Yeah, I don't necessarily disagree with anything that you said. And the only reason that this Bucks team is at number 5 for me is because they play in the East. That is the only reason. And maybe you're
Fair.
right. Maybe I should have considered. Path did come into play here with a lot of these rankings, but like, yeah, as a team, I would hear an argument, yeah, for lower about where you had them. But again, like you said, I clearly think they're number 2 in the East, even with all their flaws. And I have been a Bucks detractor and doubter ever since Glenn Doc Rivers was instated as the head coach here, and I viewed him as a fundamentally limiting factor for why they couldn't get it done. And to be clear, I don't think the Milwaukee Bucks can get out of the East unless the Boston Celtics suffer an injury. And that's why they're at 5, is because I don't really view anybody else out East as real competition. And if that breaks their way, I could somehow see this super flawed Bucks team just creeping into the finals out of basically sheer luck. And not just sheer luck. I mean, Giannis and Dame obviously are going to have to go superhuman. But that's it. You know, it's so funny because ironically, like, the Bucks put all of their chips in on Damian Lillard, and I don't blame them.
Yeah.
That was the right move to make after the season that Damian Lillard just had one of the greatest, most efficient 30-point per game seasons of all time. Like, I don't even disagree with the move to do it. I think that was the right
it was a
move.
home run.
Yeah, and so, but that's it. That's all they got. Brook Lopez is falling off a cliff, like you said, man. Chris Middleton, you just can't trust. Doc Rivers, you can't trust. They didn't address their point of attack defense. They got Pat Bev. Like, the Bucks just simply have not changed throughout this season. To quote Dennis Green, one of my favorites, man, they are who we thought they were. Yeah. And all the Bucks still have at this point in the season is Giannis and Dame. And if you really believe in the Bucks, that's the only reason you believe in them. And again, the only reason they're number 5 on my list is because of the comically weak Eastern Conference that we have here. And that's why I say I don't think the gap between them and Miami is that big. I don't think the gap between New York and them is all that big. The East is just weak. And, and a big shout out to New York, man. That team is going to be, I wish I had shouted them out in my honorable mentions. That team is going to be a really tough out, regardless of health. That team's just going to scratch and claw. I'm disappointed by the Bucks, and I would be utterly astounded if this team got to the finals with Doc Rivers.
Yeah, it's not just Doc. Let's not make it that. Doc certainly doesn't help, but they have a lot of issues. But yeah, I just can't say that I would be shocked if they lost in the first round, because you're going to draw probably Miami or Philly, man. Those are tough first-round matchups, and you're a team that is playing bad basketball now with bad vibes, and you need your duo to just carry you. That's what you need.
Yeah.
So I see your argument about the path. Again, I'm just basically looking at how good are these basketball teams. And I just think, like, the Thundermen play way better basketball. The Timberwolves play way better basketball. My number five, I think, is playing better basketball when it matters. And I actually like their playoff formula a little bit more than what we're seeing from the Bucks right now.